I'm going to talk about how to protect yourself online, and really, this is something that uh, is always changing. Things evolve. Things the world is a lot different than it was 10 years ago, and I've been taking a look more at you know what security practices and things have changed, and I learned a lot. So I wanted to share some of that with people here. So, so we will cover top few steps that will reduce some of your risk from online, what key accounts you really should focus on protecting, and what apps and services that are most valuable to use. Now, I will be going through this, so it'll be at first pretty high level. I will then have a Q&A at the end. We should have plenty of time to answer questions. If you'd like, though, I can address questions during the talk. So I want to start off talking a little bit about data breaches. It's something that we hear a lot about in the news. There's a lot of it going on. It's almost daily, but people don't necessarily see how it's relevant to them. So, but it can be relevant to you, right? Even if you've never done anything with that company, you've never heard of them, never done business with them, it can still affect you. So that's because hundreds of companies are collecting and storing information about you because that's their business. Not just about you, but really about everybody. Because your personal data and everybody's personal data has actual monetary value. That is like nearly the underlying engine that runs a lot of the internet economy is ads, and ads are usually targeted, and targeted means they know something about the person who is potentially looking at those ads. So gathering information on you and everybody is their business model. So, well, I mean, that's okay. We kind of know and accept this, but it does kind of create a problem. That information is also collected by companies called data brokers. And data brokers accumulate this information from every place they can get, and create literally profiles of everybody that they can ever find. And so they consolidate the data from all kinds of sources. So it might come from one app that you use that's free, that happens to get access to your phone number and your email and maybe some of your interests, and they're free, but they sell that data to a data broker and they make money from it. And that's how they have their business. And the data broker gets a little information about you. And that happens over and over and over again. As far as getting that data, they sell it to whoever wants the data. Now, the people who are buying this might be advertisers, they could be investigators, creditors, employers, and people, stalkers, whoever. I mean, and hackers also can buy data about anyone or any people that they would like to. It's almost a completely unregulated industry. There are no rules. They operate very much behind the scenes. Very few people are aware of them in any great length. The only regulation I'm aware of around them has to do with if you want your data removed, you can actually request that they remove the data about you. And that's just going to come about relatively recently. But still, data brokers are a massive area that contains a lot of information about a lot of people sitting in one spot. And so that lends itself to potential for identity theft, whether that information is purchased or whether it is stolen from the data broker. Now, we had a recent hack in earlier this year, there was a massive attack, and it exposed this level of information. So 272 million unique social security numbers were stolen, right? Uh, and along with 600 million phone numbers, along with your full name, your addresses, your date of birth. I mean, literally everything that you would, at least all the basic information you would need to do identity theft. And this particular database of this many, hundreds of millions of social security numbers is impacts older Americans the most because the average age of the database is 70 years old. So we pretty much think that most every American, especially older American, is part of this breach. And this is available on the dark web. Hackers can get access to this information. So it's a disaster um, for your own security. And the reason being, people can use this and like I said, identity theft and pretend to be you because they have all your information and they can answer the questions that would be asked of them. So anyway, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of potential problems out there, but it's important to be proactive and understand what you can do about it and not to be a victim. So just to think is about what is your primary defense between you and all the hackers that are out there who are eager to like get your assets, right? And the primary defense that you have, the one thing that stands between you and the hackers mostly is secure passwords, right? It's your password, whatever that is. And because they have all the information, but what they don't necessarily have is your password. And so the passwords, we need to talk about passwords because there's been a lot of change in the industry in the last 10 years. Things are CPUs and GPUs are way faster and they can be cracked much easier than they used to, especially at the old recommendations they had for passwords. So any personal information, like we said, is more widely available. So, it's easier for people to pass themselves off as you to get more information. And you see this a lot also that you'll see Apple finds, weaknesses in their software and they put out patches and then the hackers then turn around and find new ways to get into things and everybody is constantly upgrading. They're upping their games, right? You know, Windows and Mac gets more and more defended and the hackers get more and more sophisticated in how they get access to it. So things are a lot easier. There's been a lot of acceleration between the people writing the software and the people trying to break the software. But in the meantime, most people have not changed their own personal practices of security at all in 10, 20 years. So if you're doing the same old stuff that you always done, you're basically dead in the water. You're a sitting duck. So password strength that needs to be looked at again. And so talk about what a weak password looks like right now. So any single word in any language is a weak password. And this really doesn't matter that much how long it is because of something called a dictionary attack. Anything that can be looked up in a dictionary, even if it has a number after it, will be tried one of the first things they'll try. And this is very much automated. It's very easy to do. So anything that has like your date of birth, birthdays, pet names, streets you lived at, this is all information that is now much more available and can be used to try your passwords. I'd say anything under 12 characters long is not good enough because it can be cracked. And the worst thing of all is any password that you've used in more than one spot. And this is because of something called credential stuffing. That is, as soon as a hacker learns of a password that you've used in one place, then they will immediately go in and try to sign in to like everything they can think of with your email and that password. And so that's what makes it such a problem. Um, and that's something that it's important to take a look at and make sure that you're not doing this. So what does a modern strong password look like now? And I'd say there's two different styles of them. There is the memorable style, which is essentially a long password made of multiple words um, that are strung together. And sometimes they're mostly referred to as passphrases. So this is one style you can see. And this is something you could potentially memorize. And this might be easier, dog ate my homework, and maybe some letters and numbers. And there's also the random style that is generated by different software designed to generate longer passwords. And it's complete gibberish, just numbers, letters, upper and lowercase. But really what's interesting is that the memorable style is, if it's just a few characters longer, it's just as secure or more secure than the random style. So whatever's the most important thing is that they need to be long and they need to be more than one word if you're using words because of dictionary attacks. So this is kind of the essential things to know about the passwords that are protecting your finances from the hackers. All right, so it's the challenge with longer passwords and using unique passwords everywhere is that you'll never remember it. And that's why password managers are really becoming essential now. It's just too much for people to think of because I mean, as we've been on the internet a long time, and I have hundreds of accounts in different places. There's no way I can remember unique passwords for every one of them. So
Can I ask you a question?
go ahead.
If you're using a long, memorable passwords, like a string of words,
Yeah.
does it matter what separator you use between words, or if you even have separators? Like I see you use dashes there.
I think you can, I think it's whatever works for you. It's also an opportunity to introduce the other things that are going to be required, like if they want to put it, if like you say your password must include, digits, upper and lower case, and symbols, you might introduce symbols between the words or numbers between the words to make sure you meet those requirements. So so I think it's whatever style works for you and also meets the requirements for the passwords. So to password managers, I think there's a lot of password managers available, but the thing is, this is where you're putting all your eggs into one basket, and you want to make sure that that software is as secure as humanly possible. Because if that is compromised, then the hacker has every password that you have everywhere. So I would say that the only password managers to even consider are ones that have gone where the company has put them through third-party audits for security to make sure that they're secure. And they also have a history of being out there and not having breaches. So in this case, 1Password is a pretty clear winner as is doing all these things, and they've been out there for at least a decade or more. It's also is one of the easier ones to use and learn. So I recommend this pretty much exclusively as, if you're going to be serious about security. So how do password managers work, right? And I'm going to focus on the full-fledged managers and not the bare bone ones. Uh, what they essentially do, their fundamental job is to generate long random passwords for you and remember them and sign and help you sign in on every site you go to that where you need to provide a username and password. So the password manager does integrate with your browser to put in your username and password automatically. It also does a little more than that. It includes a digital vault for where you can put in files or notes and things like that that are also locked up in the same security that your passwords are. And so it's a great place to put things of, important value. If you want to put, I don't know, pictures of your driver's license or passport or anything else that is an important file that you would want to keep from being accessed generally, you can put that there. I think 1Password offers about a gigabyte of free storage that in part of their vault, that part of the vault. So, and what's also pretty neat is that password managers often allow something called a family version to have shared vaults for sets of passwords that you can share a set of your passwords between certain people in your family. So if you have a Netflix password, let's say, and you want that to be available to everyone in your family, you can put that in one of the vaults that is shared. You have like a financial part that is not shared with the kids or something, then that can go in a different vault that maybe is only shared with your spouse or no one. So there's a very good set of management that allows you to manage passwords in a way that makes it work for people who are in a family or are a small business. Now, password managers do their best to integrate with a browser, but every browser, every web page is different, and the way they ask for a password is different. And um, the password manager does its best to figure out where to put the password that you need. But sometimes the site is just too confusing, and you will have to like manually go to the password manager and say, I need the password for this site, and then you need to paste it in directly. So copy paste. Um, so it's good to have some experience with it and to know when you need to take over. My experience, really, maybe only 1 out of 100 websites are going to have to be done manually. So moving off from password managers for a moment, I want to talk about preventing identity theft. And a specific type of identity theft is about people opening loans in your name. So the way to prevent this is you need to prevent creditors from accessing your credit report. So even though creditors are not the bad guys, um, preventing creditors from accessing your credit report will keep them from being able to open any credit. So, what would happen with identity theft is that they would come in, pretend to be you, and work with your banker or your financial institution and say, I want these kind of loans, and provide your identification as far as the bank or financial institution knows that is you, right? So all these kind of loans can be put on to using your line of credit and without your knowledge, and they can take the money and disappear. And you won't even know about this um, until creditors come asking why you haven't been paying your bills. So this completely messes up your credit. It's a huge headache to fix, and it's misery for everybody who gets into this situation. Um, so the best way to deal with this is to never get in that spot in the first place. And to do that, uh, working with the credit bureaus to set up a credit freeze is the most effective way you can do this, because if creditors can't get to your credit report, they will not open any line of credit. And it can be you, it can be somebody claiming you, but if they don't know whether you're, just declared bankruptcy or you have the world's best credit, they are not going to give a loan to anybody. So by controlling this, by telling the credit bureaus that we don't, no one has access to my credit report, that will prevent it. So, so by setting up, you set up this thing called a freeze, and essentially you would have to go into a website, into one of the credit reporting websites and say, don't allow anyone. When you do want to do credit, if you want to like refinance your mortgage, if you want to get a loan, you want to get a different car, or different credit is required, you can go in first to the credit bureau and called thawing the freeze, and that is simply a matter of like a 1 hour turnaround, and then you can go and work with a loan officer. They can check your credit, and then it will return back to the thaw state as soon as you want. So essentially, it's a small inconvenience for when you do want to actually add additional credit, but it will prevent you from ever having to deal with people opening credit in your name. So um, I'll provide a link at the end of this talk that will actually give you instructions on exactly how to set this up. It's free to do. It's indefinite to use. It's legally required. I've actually done this myself back in March, and it's very simple.
At
So
least two of the big three
mhm,
try to sell you services when you go to do it.
that's right.
And at least one of them, it looks as though you must buy some service to do it, but it's not true. If you can freeze it on all three for free, but it can
Yeah,
be a little bit tricky to find the free access.
that's right. And in the article that I'll share at the end of this, they actually have links to go within those websites and go right to the part that lets you set up the freeze. So you'll not have to navigate through their website and kind of get all their offers. The other thing is, often in the past, credit freezes were told people, if people went through if you were part of a person who was involved as a person who went through a credit through a breach, right? And you were at high risk of this problem, you would be told, oh yeah, go freeze your credit. But there's no reason to wait for that happen. You can do it now, and there's really no downside to doing it now. It's way better to have it so it's impossible for this to happen than trying to race hackers to get it access to your credit line. Now, what Kenji was saying, there's three different kinds of services that are offered by the credit unions. There's freezing, locking, and monitoring. Freezing is free. It works, it stays active indefinitely as long as you want it, as long as you want it. It was mandated by law because of some of these problems that we're talking about now, and you can turn it off or on whenever you want. Now, locking is very similar to freezing, but this is the one that is not mandated by law, and it is what the credit unions, the credit uh, bureaus came up with themselves, and it is paid through a subscription, often at like $24 a month or up. They also allow some data sharing that is not allowed in the freeze. And they might give you an app that lets you have a button to turn off and on instead of going to a website and putting in a PIN. So there's a slight convenience, but really the freezing is by far the superior option. Now the monitoring, you hear about these being offered all the time after a breach. And but the problem is the monitoring is more like a camera, like a security camera. It doesn't prevent anything. It just perhaps provides you some warning of suspicious activity, which is really rather ambiguous, and it doesn't prevent them from actually going in and abusing things. So really, the bottom line is you're better off freezing your account, um, preventing the break-in, and not just getting warnings. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is like related to strong passwords, and it's two-factor authentication, also called 2FA. And it's also called multi-factor authentication. And really, this is let's say two-factor authentication, multi-factor, they're the same thing. They're just different terms. But what you need to know is this is a second layer of protection that works in addition to your password. And you probably already had this because most financial institutions now, say if you go in to log in to pay a credit card bill, you put in your username and password, and it will send a code to your phone and say, hey, type this code in when you get it on your phone. And so that's an additional way of verifying that you are you. And that's pretty good, but it is not, but there's one major drawback to it that can still be defeated by hackers. And that is that your phone number can be stolen from you. And this is something that is called, this is done by hackers. They can call up your carrier and say, hey, I lost my, I'm Joe Blow. I lost my phone, it was stolen from me or it fell off a cliff. And they'll give the right information because they have information about you. And they'll say, I need it moved to my new phone here. And the carrier has often provided that switch from your legitimate phone over to the hacker's phone. And then they can receive your security codes, and that's all they need. If that's the last piece they need to log in, they can then get access to your financial accounts. And that's a huge problem. So when it comes to this social engineering technique with a cell phone carrier, there's two closely related terms that you'll hear. And SIM swapping is moving your phone number from one device to another on the same carrier. So like if you get a new iPhone, you're going to have your number. It's like a SIM swap. Port out means moving your phone number between carriers. And this is related to the number portability that happened some time ago to prevent carriers from locking your number to them. So either way, but either one of these techniques can be used by hackers to get access to your phone number. But now, and maybe in the last few weeks, there's been a new legal mandate for the carriers that allows you to do something quite like a credit freeze service, where you can go into your carrier and say, I want to freeze the ability for you to do any sort of movement of my cell phone number. And each carrier calls it something slightly different. On AT&T, it's called the wireless account lock. On T-Mobile, it's called SIM protection and port out protection. Verizon is called SIM protection and number lock. So each of these are a matter of you going into your normal website for your carrier, signing into your account, and finding these particular terms and turning these protections on. And they'll give you like a secondary PIN that you'll need to do to then unlock this protection. So whenever you're going to upgrade your phone, or you're going to upgrade your services, or you're going to change carriers, you'll need to go to that website, sign in under your normal account, provide the PIN to do the unlock, and then you can then have your phone you can do the things legitimately by changing numbers or carriers. So, any questions about the credit freeze or the SIM lock?
Yeah, if you have an unrestricted SIM on your phone, is that what you're saying? Like I can, my phone is unlocked. Is that the
Right.
same thing?
I think, no, this is about your phone number, right?
Oh,
It's less about, because if you claim your phone was stolen,
right.
you need access to your phone number because you might need to make calls and things. I mean, they may say, okay, well, we'll bill you for that phone that you lost, or we'll keep charging you or whatever, but it's not you, right? They don't care. They're just going to have the number moved to their phone, just in order to get enough time to get access for your 2FA codes. So
Hmm.
it doesn't mean, I don't think this really has really much to do with, whether you're still under obligation to be with that carrier or anything. Um, it, right, it's just simply a matter of them claiming something happened to the phone. So, right.
So is
So
SIM swapping
that,
physical SIMs or eSIMs or both?
it's both, really. I think that SIMs aren't really your number. That's really kind of a it's kind of been passed off as your number, but your actual SIM card, whether it's a physical SIM or not, really doesn't really have your phone number. It has something called an IMEI number. And that's really just kind of an identifying number for you as a cellular subscriber. And that number, that IMEI number is associated with what your phone number is. So, so yeah, the the SIMs themselves are not your phone number. And that's how come they can move them around to different cards. All right.
Gerald, your hand is up. Did you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Uh, I wanted to first tell you that freezing your account is a great idea. Be careful about what web browser you use to contact them, however. I found that one of mine I could not contact using Safari. I
Hmm,
had to go to Chrome or something. Um, and it's very easy to turn them off for just a couple of hours so that people can do stuff.
right,
As soon as that's done, it's frozen back up automatically and everything's great. So that's a good suggestion, I think. My
great.
question is,
Sure.
what's your feeling about using authenticator apps for that 2FA?
That's preferable. I mean, anytime you can take responsibility yourself and take another company out of the loop of your security, you're better off. Um, and I haven't really getting into the whole your own authenticator apps, but for you, I'd say, yeah, an authenticator app is better than 2FA for sure. And it does not require to have cell phone service.
Yeah, I the VA, I can get into my VA health records and so forth, but I need to use a second 2FA on that one. And they've given me the choice of being able to use ID Me, and I
Hmm.
think it really works very, very well.
Right. Yeah. Having a second factor authentication of any kind is better than not having it and just using a
Amen.
password.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I do want to cover some starting points and some tips here. Uh, and remember, security is a continuum. There's never perfect security, but you can always improve from where you are. And I think just think about good, better, and best, right? It's any effort you make to improve your security matters. Uh, Even if it's a small step, it's a step, and it all builds on each other. So I would not get, I would encourage people to not feel overwhelmed with the number of things that they might want to do. Uh, is just start simple but start. It's sort of like the old adage of outrunning the bear, right? If two people are fleeing from a bear, and the joke is that the one person asks the other, how are we going to outrun this bear? And the other person replies, well, we don't have to outrun, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. So it's just a matter of not necessarily being the easiest target out there for hackers. And the more things you can put into place to improve your security, the less likely you are to be, the target. So yeah, definitely work to make steady incremental progress on your security. So my suggestions is to if you're not using a password manager already, get and learn to use a good password manager. And absolutely recommend 1Password. It's been proven. It's just very hard to compete with. It is a subscription base price. It's about $36 a year for an individual. But considering the value that has to your overall security, I think it's well worth it. So URL here for a review of password managers, and it covers 1Password in a lot of detail. All right.
I want to say, I've been using 1Password since the day that it was first introduced to the Mac user group community, way back in the early 2000s, I think. But now I'm at a point where, and I mentioned just a few minutes ago, getting into my VA account, I don't even have to to type a number or anything anymore. I just sit here with my mouse and I click about 5 times and I'm in. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it works well. It works.
Yes, it does.
So I think outside of once you got the good password manager thing set and you've had some time with it, I'd suggest the next step is to freeze your credit reports. And the reason it's important to get the password manager set up first is because you're going to need this to have a place you want to make sure your credit report accounts are set up with secure passwords, along with some of the freeze and unfreeze codes that you'll receive from the 3 different credit bureaus. Now, I have a URL here. This is an excellent page that has the person I actually used to learn how to freeze my credit reports. And so I recommend this. This is a webpage that talks about it. There's also a YouTube video embedded in here that I use that literally goes in real time, step by step through each of the 3 services, shows you exactly how to do it. Highly recommend using that. And after that, I haven't talked about this yet, but your email is a critical account because unlike most of your other accounts, if someone gets a hold of your email account, then they essentially have all your accounts, because they can just go to any account you have and say, I forgot my password. And we'll say, okay, we'll send you a link to reset it. And then they'll reset it for you. And then they have access. So you really need to make sure your email password is strong. I'd also suggest in this case to make sure that email password is a memorable one that you can remember and type in, because it is so important. You do not want to have to always rely on your password manager only to know what that password is. And then for your main financial websites, make sure you're using passwords that are strong. And if they offer 2-factor authentication, set that up. All right. That's what I have. Any more questions?
So Steve
Yeah.
Gibson has a thing about where he says passwords are a needle in a haystack. So you can make the haystack much bigger by just adding a memorable password, like with a bunch of spaces or X's at the beginning and end, just making it longer. And that do you agree with that? Or do you have any problems with that?
I think I've seen that a bit too. I'd say just as long as you and maybe anyone who needs to read it in the future can understand what it is. I would wonder about a lot of spaces. It's pretty hard to count them. But adding X's and dots and stuff at the end or at the beginning that you can see is probably a good idea. Because it's the length that matters. It's really the length. So whatever makes that long and is not easily guessable.
So somebody who's trying to crack it, they can't tell that you've got repeating characters at the beginning and end.
No, they can't.
Yeah, I've got
No,
a quick question.
go ahead.
I understand that there's something that they've been talking about where with regards to passwords and was it passcode or there's another term I think that's
Yeah, exactly.
Pass keys.
Keys, yeah.
passkeys, right? Yeah, what's that all about?
Passkeys are a way to use, instead of a password, having a public-private key way of providing instead of passwords.
What is it called again?
It's essentially a way to try to kind of do away with passwords by having the same kind of security that secures your web page.
Passkeys.
Encrypted through HTTPS. There's something called a public and private key exchange that is done for every time you're accessing HTTPS. And they could do that, but the problem with it right now is it's not really fully baked. And I avoid it because some different password managers handle it different or they don't handle it at all. But the worst problem is it's not portable. Once it's in a password manager, you can't really move it around. It's not a text string. It's very hard to.
They're fine. I'm just gonna block the light.
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. There's somebody else talking.
Okay. So right now, I mean, I think they're working on making improvements that will allow that sort of portability. But right now, I would say wait until they have got the kinks worked out of it before you consider it. I think
Okay.
strong passwords and 2FA are the way to go for now. Keep an eye on pass keys, and once they get portability of those things where you can actually manage them yourself, then you have something that's going to be really good. But that's not
Right.
here.
Okay. Thank you.
A way I think to create a memorable password is to use phrases that you know.
Yes.
For instance, my password I use to get into this computer is a combination of when I was married, where I was married, and so forth, and my wife's name. And I've got first letters from words and those kinds of things. But it's something I can remember because it happened to me.
That's
I
good.
understand some people use the phrases from songs, maybe. And if you just add some different little things, like you say, the spaces and the commas and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't take long to make a nice password. It's easy to remember.
That's exactly right. As long as it's several words long, I would say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Avoid just using like a birthday alone or
No, that's not what I'm saying.
exactly. You got it right.
In fact, the password I use on one of my other computers is I have used Apple computers since 1981. That's not just that, but I remember what it is, and it's easy to put in.
It's great. Yeah. And I use that kind of thing I use memorable passwords for the kind of things where I will need to type it in, right? So when my
Yes,
accounts like when I'm logging into my Mac, my user account on my Mac. Or
Exactly, yes.
my email accounts all are based with memorable passwords. My 1Password manager, and this is something I didn't mention before, is that 1Password actually, the reason they call it 1Password is because you can't get to any of your passwords until you provide that app with your master password, and it needs to be strong. So that's where these long memorable passwords come into play. And so yeah, there are definitely those kind of places where if you need to type them, you need to be able to know them on demand. The memorable passwords are the way to go. So
That to
let's
me is
see.
a problem with the password, the Mac Passwords app is, or the Apple Passwords app, is that I don't want a long device passcode on my phone.
Me too.
But a short like my 6-digit number doesn't seem like enough to give access to somebody to all my passwords.
Exactly. And that's like right now the biggest weakness with the password manager that Apple just put out.
But yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Right. So that's why I'm not really talking about the Apple password manager. It's brand new, but it does it its strength is only as strong as whatever it takes to get into your phone or your computer. And like Kenji was saying, I don't want to have to be putting in, a 30 character password every time I want to, clear my screensaver or open my phone. So I am willing to accept a lower bar to do those things compared to my, password that controls all my passwords. So yeah, and that's why I'm not recommending it. That's why I'm stick with 1Password for now. I'll bet Apple.
I've got another question.
Yeah.
I spent an hour and a half on the phone with Apple tech support today, actually, about this very issue because I thought I'd been hacked. And for some reason, my computer continues to sort of just get disconnected off of the internet, and I've got to reboot it or, power cycle my router or whatever. But there's, and I've got 1Password and I love it. But then there's pass keys on the Mac, and I guess it gets stored in iCloud, and then there's passwords that get stored in the different browsers.
Yeah.
And there's also, I mean, everybody and their brother seems to have a password manager, including Norton. What are your thoughts on these um,
Oh, on
browser,
different password?
well, these browser-based password managers or whatever, and I guess it's the Apple pass key or key access or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
The thing about browser-based passwords in my experience is, I mean, I use several browsers even on one computer, and I have multiple computers. And what I've run into in the past is I may have had one set of passwords that were saved in Safari on my Mac Mini, but then I can't get to them on my, you know, on my laptop, or might be like I might have it in Firefox on my laptop and it's not on my Mini, it's not on my phone. It just gets really confusing, what browser on what device has what password. I know there are synchronization things, but not all browsers do that by default. And it's easy if you don't have a password manager set up to end up having the password saved in the browser. And it can just get lost, or everything can be a little pile of passwords here and a little pile of passwords there. And it can be a mess, especially if your device gets lost or or fails, then you may not have access to that password anymore. So that's why I like a dedicated app like 1Password, or there's a few others.
Hmm.
But at least
So
having
you,
one app, that's where every password goes, right? It doesn't go, I do not keep passwords in browsers. Everything goes in one password.
What about the Apple, what is it, the passkey or Apple, Apple key access or whatever it is?
Yeah, that was essentially that's the way Apple manages passwords when you save them in Safari, right? It would put them in the keychain,
Ah, okay, keychain, right.
right?
Okay, so
And so
what I think I hear you telling me is that the very best way to deal with it is just keep all your passwords in one password. Don't add them into your browsers at all.
Yeah.
And the only way that it gets into, I guess, the Apple passkey uh, uh, area is through Safari.
that's the way up until recently, yes. I mean, now Apple just introduced their own password manager in like 18.2 iOS and 15.1 for Sequoia. Um, and essentially it exposes it's a standalone app in the same way 1Password is a standalone app. And what happens is it accesses and makes visible those passwords that are stored in the keychain. And as far as I know, they're still stored in the keychain, but it just makes it more easy to manage because getting into the keychain is really rather intimidating for people who are not technical.
Hmm.
So that app just makes that much more user friendly. But it comes with its own limitations. And also the other thing about between the keychain and or Apple's password app is it is an Apple only system.
Right.
So if you have passwords to manage for work that are on Windows or Linux or Android, anything like that, you just will not be able to access those passwords. But with password manager like 1Password, although I think it started on the Mac, it did extend to all platforms. And so you have portability to everything. And so that's
That's
a big,
helpful. Yeah,
yeah.
that's helpful.
Plus, you have to think about Apple's ability to be able to handle that. And I'll give you, for instance, how long have we had Safari or how am I going to say this? Siri, is that right?
Siri. Yeah.
Yeah. How long have we had Siri around? And now they're talking about Apple Intelligence. And I go to my car and I say, Siri, I'd like to listen to a radio station. And she says, I can't do that because you're in the car.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enough said.
I think,
And
yes. Go ahead.
another reason to use 1Password is that it stores so many other things. Your
Yeah.
software licenses, databases, credit cards,
Mhm.
secure notes, in addition to your logins. So, I mean, it's really convenient for storing stuff.
I agree. That's something that they do an excellent job at. And anytime you need to store something securely, and not only you get two benefits, right? It's stored securely, plus you know where to go to look for it. So, and you don't have to worry about dealing with different encryption programs, just and making sure that that's working right and it's cross-platform and everything. It just handled for you. So yeah, it is very good at that. It's a good point.
So to clear out all of these passwords out of all these browsers, you basically go in and like clearing your cache and the passwords and et cetera,
Right.
in the settings apps on all these browsers. Basically, it gets
Wow.
rid of it.
Right. And there's another benefit that happens when you do that. Once 1Password has all your passwords or even most of your passwords in one place under its domain, it can tell you, hey, you've got duplicates, and it'll warn you. It says here's some things you can do to improve your security. It'll say, oh, here's these passwords are too weak, and it will point them out. It will also tell you, and since it knows what accounts and what websites you're using these accounts at, if they integrate with a service called Have I Been Pwned? And in other words, if a hack happens at one of those websites across the internet and you happen to have an account at it, this password manager will warn you that that has been compromised and you should immediately change that password. So if they're scattered around in every little browser and every little place, you won't get those same benefits from the ones that are stored in the browser.
Really timely and helpful.
Yeah, and there's a lot more that can be done besides this. This is really just the basics. I would say there's a lot more we can talk about on two-factor authentication, like those authenticator apps. I've actually using some Yubico keys to generate some of the two-factor authentications, which are pretty interesting little devices. I'd say, and there's a lot you can do to kind of prevent some of the data leaks and clean up some of the stuff that is in the data brokers to prevent some of that from being so easily accessible. So there's a lot more we can talk about another time. So let me know if any of you would be interested in certain topics that go beyond this one. Anyway, there's no other questions. I think that's it for me.
Dan, thank you very much.
Yeah,
All right.
Dan, thank you. That was
Yeah,
very
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
good.
thanks, Dan.
Thank you,
All right.
Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, great. Well, enjoy your upcoming Christmas holiday.